Hi everybody, my name is Jeff Fowler, President of the Apartment Owners Association, and it is great to have you with us today. We're going to be speaking about some recent changes in the LA County court records, but these changes have also been made in some Northern California counties, and also just moving forward, we believe that this will become more widespread throughout the state. This is must-know information. I am very, very glad that you've taken the time out of your day to join. And so yeah, before we get into it, AOA, we've been around for over 40 years, and our goal is to help you to, just to stay informed and to do the very best that you can with your rental property. And so we have seminars that are free for members, and just to mention, on the 14th and 15th of May, we have the move-in, move-out process. That's going to be in Buena Park and in Santa Clara. And then also again on the 22nd in Long Beach. And plus on May 21st, we have the San Diego Landlording Power Conference that's coming up. There's going to be 7 different speakers one day. And really encourage you to go to that if you're in the San Diego area. And then, of course, on August 22nd, we have the $1 Million Trade Show at the Long Beach Convention Center. That's a bigger event. There's over 20 different seminars, and we'll have at least 150 different companies represented there. And these are all companies that will help you do your job of property management better. And anyway, we will take questions at the end. If you're watching on AOAUSA.com, there is a blue help button there on the right side, and you can type questions in there. And I would say hold the questions till the end, because we're going to cover some information, and it's going to stir some things in you for sure, I believe. And this event is sponsored by AOA Tenant Screening, and we're excited to partner with our speaker. And he is an AOA member. First and foremost, his parents were AOA members, and so we've known him for a long time. He is a licensed investigator with over 25 years of experience. He's done over 1 million background checks and tenant evaluations. He's a former college professor and dean specializing in behavioral, family violence, and criminal assessments. And I've just talking with him, he's worked for over 40 different schools, including UCLA and many other very incredible schools. So there's so much more to him, but we don't want to take our time on all of that. So we'll just cut right to it. It's my pleasure to introduce to all of you Jonathan Kraut.
Hi, everybody. First, Jeff, I wanted to thank you. What we're doing today as AOA members, and I feel thankful that we're breaking through a new paradigm of thinking. We're shifting the way that background checks and tenant screening is done. Without the support and the encouragement, some of these changes wouldn't have happened. So I'm going to go through a quick slideshow. I'm going to try to reveal a lot of information that probably only investigators would know, but we think it's very valuable for our AOA members to know. Today's discussion will be your responsibility as a landlord or property owner, how and where records are kept, and we're talking about criminal records, civil records, records relating to abuse, things that if you want to screen for tenancy, who are you and where are you looking, the value of this information, what is considered a valid search, the recent changes in policies, and this is really the impetus as to why we are trying to adjust and adapt to a different format. The policies are changing, and they're changing quickly. And I wanted to commend AOA for being the first large organization to take this seriously and to make changes in the process to accommodate for these policy changes. New approaches to tenant screening. What do these policies make us do, and how can we do a better job? And then finally, we'll take your questions. First, your responsibility. So if you bring a person into a home or in proximity of other people, you have to make sure that person is probably, to your best of your knowledge, of good standard, of good behavior, and has financial means to support themselves. So when you, as a landlord or property manager, bring someone in who, let's say, is a pedophile or sex offender or murderer or drug dealer into an apartment building, you're the one that brought them in, and if anything goes wrong, likely you would be responsible for creating the conditions necessary for that abuse or criminal activity to occur. So you have to be very careful of who you bring in. Also, you have to protect yourself. You don't want to be vulnerable to people who could possibly hurt you. There is a financial responsibility component, which means if that person is unable to pay, has a history of fraud, embezzlement, trafficking, bad checks, you would want to know. Not only is it a safety issue that you should be looking at, but it's also a financial issue that you should be looking at. One way to do that is look at a history of previous tenancy. Another way to look at it is what we call the duty of care doctrine. So I know a lot of you haven't heard of this before, but a duty of care doctrine says that if you bring in a person into an environment with those who are less than fully able, for example, children, that's defined as under 18, the elderly, defined as 55 or over, anyone who's cognitively impaired. If you bring someone into that environment, you have a duty of care that goes beyond a simple tenancy to a simple renting to anybody who's there. You've got to really take it. So if you bring someone, let's say, into an apartment building with 20 units, are any of those occupied by children or elderly? Or could they be? If they could be, or if they are, you have a duty of care doctrine obligation to keep those people safe. Court verified data. So if the data is not verified by the court, it's not really admissible to be used as a tool to decide if someone should or should not be a resident. So you have to verify with the court. Free copies to a person regarding their history. Upon request, you have to provide that to them. And there's something called the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And the FCRA, as we call it, has rights, and those rights should be given to somebody if you're going to deny them based on a history report. So that's your responsibility to make that available, not only the report if they ask for it, but a copy of their rights. You can exclude conduct beyond 7 years, and there's some exceptions, I'll go into that in a bit, and you can exclude conduct not related to tenancy. For example, if they have a DUI, or they got a ticket for an unlicensed dog, or they have an open container, those really don't relate to tenancy, and you wouldn't really want to eliminate somebody because of something minor not related to their financial condition or not related to how they interact with others. And then finally, the person who has a negative report must have an opportunity to dispute the findings of that report. In other words, maybe the report is wrong. We know from history, and after doing 1 million background checks, my agency has found there are people who have the same last name and same date of birth as somebody else. There are people who have a case that was improperly filed by the court, and those people have a right to object and correct it. Okay. How and where records are kept. So this is really critical to the whole process of background screening. Records are not kept in the internet in an instant search. They're not kept there. Each jurisdiction is separate. So there are about 3,100 counties in the United States, 58 in California. Each county and each state has its own records. They're not mixed together. And if you have a civil record system and a criminal record system, you're talking of over 5,800 separate indexes nationwide. Obviously, you can't check every one. And obviously, the time and expense to do that would take too long, by the time you did that, the potential renter would move on. So there is no one button to push to get a criminal record. You can't access all those 5,800 systems instantaneously. You'd have to have someone in the courthouse looking at 5,800 different computer screens at the moment you push your button. And maybe you have to come back the next day and find out the report. The clerk may not have that information. You might have to pull the file. Maybe the access is online through subscription only. About 2,000 courts require you have a subscription, a credit card on file, a license to even look at their system. So there is no instant button. And unfortunately, the belief has been you just push a button and get all of it at one time. Criminal and civil indexes are separate. So why are they separate? Well, anything regarding conduct or abuse towards others is probably civil. For example, stalking, elder abuse, child abuse, domestic violence, restraining orders, that will be found in a civil system. Rarely will there be a crossover to the criminal system. The criminal system will have speeding, DUI, attempted murder, assault, robbery, theft, other kinds of crimes that are different in nature, and the indexes are separate. In some states, there are family law cases that are even separate from those, like domestic violence, that aren't criminal or civil. So those are things that, as a landlord or property manager, you would want to know. So the main reason that we're here is to let you know that maybe 10 years ago, and even 15, an instant search, an instant national criminal search was fairly effective. Maybe 70% of the cases were in there. But over the last 10 years, most counties are no longer contributing to that system, and now that information is degraded and is no longer as valuable as it used to be. So what we're trying to do is let you know that an instant national search is probably not what you want to use anymore. It won't protect you in court. It won't get most of the cases. It doesn't even access civil. And so we're trying to let you know that that is becoming obsolete. And then finally, the one county search system is a hit and miss. If somebody, let's say, is in San Diego County and they're moving to LA County and you're going to check one county, do you check where they were or where they are? What if they lie? How many criminals lie? They really never lived in San Diego County. They actually lived in some other county. How would you know? How would you know what? So you can't just say, I'm going to check one county at random and be confident that that was successful. In fact, you have to be able to determine where they've lived and check all of them where they've lived, and then you know you've been successful. Okay, the value of this information. So in the investigations field, we have what's called a skip trace. We take their name, social, date of birth, last address, and we look for everything in their electronic record. The good thing is that investigators have access to a lot of private information. What allows our license to function is that even though we see private information, we don't disclose it, but we use it to find out information. A skip trace will tell us, do they have other names? Have they used other dates of birth? Because criminal records are usually kept by name and date of birth. Where have they actually lived? Have they applied for rent? Have they had any civil or criminal record in any other county and any other state? A skip trace will tell us what counties they've lived in, what cities they've lived in, and what state they lived in. So that way we know where to look. We obviously can't check all the 3,100 counties each at a time. We're going to be directed to where their electronic signature is, and that's where we're going. Federal indexes in prison. So it's rare, but it has happened where people are incarcerated in federal prison, like drug trafficking, money laundering, international terrorism. Those are felonies at the federal level. We check all those systems, which is not in the county, it's not in the state, that's a federal system. There are about 5 indexes that we would look at. State prisons and probation, even if they came from, let's say, Nevada or Utah or Illinois, we want to check that state. California won't have it. So if you look in California, it won't be there. It's in the state where they came from. So when you skip trace, you'll know where they were, and that's where we'll go back and look. Sex offender. So this is an exception to the 7-year rule. A sex offender who is online, and each state has its own sex offender database. So if you don't know what states they've lived in, you won't know what states to look at, but each state has their own registry of sex offenders. Those are reportable back forever. If anyone is on the sex offender registry in their state, there's no limit to time, and you'd want to know that. In other words, let's say you have some children downstairs, you're renting upstairs, and the person is a sex offender in, let's say, Florida. They come to LA, they say, oh, I'm from LA, and how would you know they're not? You never check Florida, and then they abuse the children downstairs. You as a landlord or property manager are responsible for not looking, and you don't take their word for it. You're not looking where they came from, and therefore, how would you know? Well, you should have known. The courts have ruled you should have known that that person from another state was a sex offender. Even if it was 20 or 30 years ago, if it's in the registry, it's reportable. All right, what is a valid search? This is a good question. First of all, you need to do an independent verification, which we call a skip trace. Where do we know they've lived, and what jurisdictions to look for? And we do that without them telling us. They don't have to tell us, we'll find out. Second is, you want to look in every county and every state of residence at least 7 years back. So if there are 5 counties or 3 counties or 1 county, we will look at each one. Finally, you want to make sure that the information is verified by the court. So in an instant search, you can push a button. It'll give you, let's say, 5 jurisdictions and 5 case numbers. They mean nothing to you. You don't know if that person was convicted or not. You won't know the charges. You'll then have to verify each case with that court in that county, and hopefully that county will provide you all the information. We don't expect you as a landlord to know how to do this, and even though we've done 1 million of them, every day we learn something new about some county and some state. There's always something different day to day, even policies change. So you want to verify with the court. You want to look at convictions only. For example, somebody could be arrested. There's an arrest record, but they were never convicted. It was the wrong person. You can't use that against them. You've got to verify that the case was a conviction that's relevant to tenancy. Next is you want to have a report on letterhead for your own protection. So if you use an instant search, for example, or let's say go to People Finder, you don't have an official document from a credit reporting agency that says this is what we found. So a CRA or credit reporting agency would be an investigations firm or a financial system like Equifax or TransUnion that does electronic data. They're credit reporting agencies, and they will have a report on letterhead. So if you go to some online system like Spokio, People Finder, People Search, they're not credit reporting agencies. They're simply directories of random listings that may or may not be that person. And a credit reporting agency has certain obligations. Well, a database does not have any obligations. So that database information in itself is not admissible in court and does not really protect you. And we also want to report relevant records. Like I said before, if they have an open container, driving with a headlight out, and then they got a warrant and didn't pay their warrant, that's not really relevant to tenancy. Tenancy is, are they safe to the people around them, and can they pay their bill? That's really all that we're looking at. And you also want to know what is related to abusing or disturbing others. For example, attempted murder, I'd say that's disturbing somebody. Or assault with a deadly weapon, or firing a weapon, exposed weapon, or brandishing a weapon. Those are behavioral issues that you want to know about to decide whether or not you put that person in contact with others. Now let's say you have a house in the desert. No one lives in any direction for a mile around. I don't think you really have to do a background check because they're not a danger to others, unless you want to check their financial condition. And in that case, I think a credit check would probably be sufficient. But if you have an apartment unit or other people in the building, I think you would want to do a background check. All right, recent changes in policy. So I know this is going to be disturbing. California, January of last year, passed what's called the Fresh Slate Initiative. What it means is that the criminals are now being protected by the state. And that's really hard to say. By doing some things to make it harder to find out if someone has a bad background or negative background, the state is trying to help those people who are felons and criminals from being detected, believe it or not. For example, many counties like LA, Alameda, there's about a dozen of them, Imperial, Sacramento, they're now taking the date of birth verification out of their system. You can no longer say, here's the name and here's the date of birth, does it match? Right now, especially the last 2 months, counties are taking away the date of birth. They don't want you to know if this person's going to harm you until after they harm you. Crazy. Another issue is that 48 out of the 58 counties in California now require either an in-person visit to the court or prepaid account online to access information. The courts are making it harder and harder for someone to call or walk into a court and find out if someone has a record. They're trying to hide that from you. And many other Western states are going to be following suit. So in accommodating that change in policy, we have to do something different to make it work. The diminished data access, because of the court's restriction on dates of birth and information, is, and this is what I've been told, is in the hope that removing obstacles to renting will create honesty. In other words, if you can rent to somebody, no laughing, if you can rent to somebody and they say, well, gee, I was a really bad person, but now that I'm getting an apartment, I'm suddenly honest. That's really the goal of a lot of these government agencies, believe it or not. We know that's not going to work. And they're placing opportunity over safety. The opportunity over someone who, let's say, is a serial stalker, a sexual predator, is more important to many government agencies than your safety. So that's why we're here to help you with that. Common names. Let's say we have a common name in LA County. What's the probability? I have an odd name and there's 4 of us with my same name and middle initial in the United States. If you don't have a date of birth, how do you know which one it is? And that's the goal of the county, is to discourage you from knowing. So we have some ways around that. I'll explain. One way around it is to hand search by courthouse. For example, there are 38 courthouses in LA County. If we have, let's say, three possible hits, there's a common name, 3 possible cases, we could go to each county courthouse, which could be 50 miles apart from each other, get the hand file, we read the file. In the file is the date of birth. Now the clerk could tell us, but they're going to make us go pull the file at the court and we can read the date of birth. Even now, some of the courts are now hiding that charge sheet that says count 1, count 2, count 3. They're hiding the charge sheet to prevent us from knowing what the date of birth is. Although we can still go through the file, get the address, maybe get a social. So with a hand search, we can get some of these things. But it slows down the process and makes it more expensive, and it diminishes even further the national criminal search or other search kind of indexes, because those are no longer being contributed into that system. So here's our new approach to screening. And again, AOA is the first large organization taking this on, and I appreciate the ability to work with them and help create a system that's going to protect our members. We need to really start eliminating the dependency on the national criminal search and those indexes, because they're becoming less and less viable. We should not rely on one county search. Unless you know they've only lived in that county and they've only lived in that state, if you know that, you can search one county, but otherwise, how do you know? They could have come from anywhere and later go anywhere. We want to expand the breadth of searches by county. So in our skip trace approach, if we identify 5 counties that they've lived in 7 years or more, we will check every county wherever they are. We'll check any county in the United States, in any state they've been. We have access to all those records. And to do so, we're implementing what we call an investigator live search. Investigator live searches are a human, an agent, would actually run the skip trace, look at it, decide which counties are viable and which ones are not, look at the records, access the civil records, domestic records, federal, state, probation, jail, warrants, all those things, and then piece it together. Who is lying about their name? Who's lying about their date of birth? What counties do we look at? Which counties are reportable? What information is reportable? And that way we'll put together a very competent and efficient report. Reports would be between 3 and 30 pages long. If they're 30 pages, I would say move on to another applicant. There's no real reason to, unless you want to have someone like that in your location, I would probably move on. Usually in 1 hour, we'll reply back to a request and we'll say, we found no record, meaning we checked everywhere, we went online, we went to the court system, we checked everything we could. There's no record of this person having any issue that we're worried about. That's probably very common. Probably about 80% have no record of any kind. We may report no relevant record, meaning we found some things, but it's not relating to tenancy, and it may not even be that person, but even if it was, it's not relevant. So we don't have to spend a lot of time on that. We could report a possible record, which means that there's a couple cases that would require going to the courthouse itself, driving all the way out there, pulling a file, reading the file, and driving all the way back, and there would be a hand search fee, which is your choice. Now, if you have too many of those, for example, last week we had a person that had 25 possible hits in LA County, and they were at 18 courthouses. Are you telling me that we're going to go to 18 courthouses and look? What we would say is there's too many records found, and you can have the candidate take their driver's license to the court clerk, say, I want a certified copy that my record is clean, and the court clerk, I think LA County's $42, will stamp it and say, I'm certifying your record is clean. None of these cases are yours. Now, the funny part is we have people doing that, and they get arrested at the courthouse because they have a warrant for their arrest because it was them. And for some reason, they don't know that each court talks to each other. But in the county system, they're all integrated. So this person who had a conviction in Long Beach went to Lancaster and didn't know that they share information county to county. And so he went to Lancaster, and the sheriffs came behind him in the line, took him away, and that was that. It was him. But if there are too many records to search, you can always have the applicant take their ID to the courthouse, get a letter from the county that's stamped and certified, and then you're done. So I'm ready for your questions, and I hope that wasn't too fast and too furious, but I think we're probably breaking some new ground and giving you some new ideas.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Sure.
And I think, so I hope you hear what he's saying there. Like, it was February 23rd, mark that date, for LA County, where they removed the charge sheet that he's talking about. The charge sheet which has the date of birth. So that makes it extremely difficult for an instant search to show that. So hear that it's not illegal to look for a criminal record. It's just that they're making it very difficult to find. If you have questions right now and you're watching on AOAUSA.com, there's the blue help button, and you can type your question in there and they will get that question over to me. If you're watching on YouTube, you can type your question in there and they'll get it to us. And okay, so what we are doing now, we're waiting for the questions to come in. What we are doing now, AOA Tenant Screening, is now providing this live investigator search. And early May. Right now it's May 2nd, I believe. Next week, actually, it will be part of the menu where you can pick it and do that online. Today, let's say you wanted to screen somebody today. If you wanted to screen somebody today, you would have to call in the tenant screening line, and I believe that's across the bottom of the screen. So you could call AOA Tenant Screening and do that if you're set up, if you're a member, and if you're set up for tenant screening. If you're not set up for tenant screening, there's an online end user agreement, and you could sign up pretty quickly and pick just criminal and eviction if you only wanted to get that. And if you want the whole report, the TransUnion credit report, the Experian credit report that we provide, along with the eviction reports and the other things, then you can get that. But okay, so here we are. we're going for it. We have Larry on YouTube. Do you use services like TruthFinder, or would you recommend a similar service?
Okay, good question. So TruthFinder is like PeopleSearch or Spokio. It's an index like a phone book that's extracted from lots of sources that is not admissible in court, cannot be used to determine or not determine if someone has a case, and it's not a credit reporting agency. It is simply like a phone book that someone put together and says, these things are true. Now, do a TruthFinder of yourself, and you might find 30 people that are not you. How do you know which ones to look at? How do you know if anyone has a criminal or civil record? How do you know if the FBI has a warrant for their arrest? That's not in there. They're simply a phone book of information that you have to basically go through county by county, state by state, agency by agency, and look all these things up yourself. And so the name is a little bit misleading. There are no, if you read the disclaimer, how about that?
Oh, yeah.
It will say in the disclaimer, this is for entertainment purposes only, do not use. It'll say that. It's no good, don't use it, it's for entertainment, this is no good. It says that right in the disclaimer. A credit reporting agency will say it's a credit reporting agency, this is admissible in court, this is a legal finding, there are methods of our reporting, there are methods of our ability for the applicant to complain or to dispute the findings. The rights are given to the person. There's a piece of paper in English or Spanish. These are your rights. Those are parts of the CRA obligation to the person, the subject of the search. So those online searches, as we mentioned, are not true searches. And if you read the disclaimer, it'll tell you not to use them.
Right, and there's a county in Illinois where you have to do your screening in 2 phases, and you can't even look at the criminal until they've passed all the other phases. We just had our tenant screening seminars, like in-person ones, and the attorney was saying, why don't you look at everything else first before you determine it on the criminal behavior? And so you're exposing yourself, I believe, if you use that pointer data. It's pointer data is really what it is, but if you use that to make a decision, you're exposing yourself, and it's not fair to the tenant, really, because it very well may not be them. All right, David, if the candidate volunteers his date of birth, can that be used in a search of court records? Okay,
the person, the candidate, should not volunteer their date of birth. That's really should be part of your application process. The date of birth, social, full name, including middle name, and current address is something that you are really obligated to request, because data is searched by those means. And if you don't make them do it and they don't volunteer their date of birth, now we're going to verify the date of birth anyway to make sure that what they gave you was accurate. But it should be on their driver's license or state ID. That's
Right.
what you want to look at. And they really, part of your request for tenancy is they would be giving you their ID, and you should have their date of birth. And so I wouldn't say it's a voluntary thing. Even if we don't have it and we have a name and address, we probably can get it anyway, because we're going to check. But we want to know what they give us, because that's a starting point. If they're lying about the date of birth and we find different ones, we can tell you. And so that would be very useful.
Right, and in the May issue of the magazine, it's now online, but you'll be getting it to your house sometime next week. I wrote an article about just some rental criteria. There's an application packet that we have specifically that I wrote about, and basically the rental application's in there, but there's also several other resources that you'll want to use. So if you go online, log into your member account and open up that packet, take a look at it. There's a whole lot of really good information in there and checklists and things like that. All right, so do you cover all counties in California, and how much do you charge per search?
Okay, so we cover all counties in the United States. There's 3,000, I believe, 148. So we have access to every county and every state. We don't look in every county and every state. We're going to look at the counties that our skip trace indicates where they've lived. So there are 58 counties in California. If you want us to go and check every county and every civil and criminal and family index in every county, we're talking about 160, 170 separate searches. So we try to keep it down to maybe 10 or 20. Maybe we'll check 3 indexes in LA County if they were here, and 2 indexes at the state level and 5 at the federal level. You know, we're gonna do that fairly easily and quickly because we do thousands of these so at a time. So we do these all day. But there's no reason to check everyone all the time, only where they've been. I think that answers
So
that
it's
question.
smart, yeah, it's a smart search.
Yeah, it's faster that way.
Yeah, can you pull that one back up for a second? It might be hard. Anyway, okay, and how much do you, and then how much do you charge part?
Yeah, so as an investigations company, normally these run, well, we charge our clients between $95 and $150. But there's really good news because AOA is a large organization, and because of the membership, we're going to really cut down that cost quite a bit. It's going to be way down. Have you determined the price?
It is $28.
$28, okay. So $28, we'll be able to do that. And we're doing that for 2 reasons. One is for public safety, to keep everybody safe. Mm-hmm. And the other is, since we work in high volume, it's actually cheaper us to do a lot of them than to do one at a time. And so we're able to scale our operation and reduce our costs because of the volume from AOA.
All right, there you go. And Rose Girl, do you have to do this tenant screening for all applicants or only the ones who raise some questions on their application?
That is a really good question. You cannot subjectively change policies because you like person or don't like the person. For example, the person looks honest. Well, that's my first worry right there. They look honest and who knows what's going on. You've got to check everybody the same way. Let's say that you did a background screening on someone and you found out a derogatory record. You gave them a copy of the report. They contact my agency and said, this is wrong. We verify that it's correct. We tell them the letter and the landlord, no, the application is correct. If they want to do something or fix it or expunge it, there's things that they can do. We'll tell them how to do that. But you can't selectively do screening on some people and not on others. Mm-hmm. The only exception would be they just turned 18 a week ago. Well, the records that we look at are only 18 and older. So the likelihood that they were incarcerated and imprisoned within 5 days is not very likely. So in that person, I probably wouldn't worry about it. But everyone else, you've got to treat them all the same. You can't just say, well, this person with this hair color or this eye color or this height, I'm not going to do them. You have to treat everyone the same.
Right. And depending on the property type, that you may have a different criteria for each of your property types.
Right.
But you just have to be consistent with that specific property or property type that you're working with.
Right.
And so policies don't change, but you can have multiple policies if you have multiple types of property. All right, Raquel, I am in violation of the law if I just feel threatened. I have over 40 years experience. So they're showing the unit, maybe. I'm just kind of reading into it. They're showing the unit, and the person's just feels threatening. Like their sense is this is a dangerous, scary person.
If you don't feel confident in that person, you don't have to get permission from us to not rent to them. Mm-hmm. you can just move on. For example, that's a really good point for a lot of reasons. Let's say you have 3 applicants for a location. 2 of them instantly come back with no record, they're fine, there's nothing to worry about. One person has maybe 20 possible cases, and to find out more may cost a lot of money. Well, I would just rent to one of the 2 people that have nothing and not worry, not finish the whole process to find out the other person. Maybe they have something, maybe they don't. I wouldn't use that as the reason not to rent to the person with no, but I would consider that I've got 2 people who are ready to go that are fine, and rather than completing my my search or my screening on that one person, I'd rather just quickly rent to the one of those 2. You're not violating any law unless you use that as a criteria to not rent to them, and that's the only criteria. You've got to give them a free copy of the report. You've got to give them their rights. It's 1 page. You've got to give them an opportunity to contest it. But if you don't use that as your criteria and you just say, well, I like them better, or they're ready to go, just go with one of them and not go through the whole process of finishing a screening report all the way through.
Right. So you just said you pick a better tenant. You picked a better candidate is basically what you're saying.
Right.
And we did have, just even last week, we had the tenant screening seminars. The attorney said, you can pick. It doesn't have to be the very first one that completes their registrations, their application. But anyway, so he said, yeah, you can pick. And sometimes I think we've been led to believe that the first person that gets it in 5 seconds before the other, it's not that hard and fast. From what we heard last week. Cindy on Facebook, can you use Facebook or social media account to verify them?
All right. I'll have some open disclosure here. My son, who lives in Europe, is a manager for Facebook. His job, he's a coder, a programmer. His job is to take down between 10 and 20,000 fake book accounts per day.
Oh my goodness.
Robots generate these fake accounts, and his job is to take them down. And so if robots can generate 10 to 20 or 30,000 fake book accounts per day, do you think that Facebook is trying to clean up their system? Yes, they are. But how many accounts? You could just go in and create your own account. How many accounts are verified that it's really a person, really their name, really their date of birth? How many people on Facebook post all their criminal and civil history and all the times they abused their neighbors and all the times they stole from their landlord? Facebook is basically your presentation of what you think people want to see or what they want to hear. So Facebook is not admissible evidence in court, hate to say,
Right.
because it's not verified in any way. It's simply user created.
So you're not saying don't look at it. You're just saying it's not the source of truth. Right. You can look at it.
You should look at it and just see, if they have guns in the background and they're having big, containers of drugs with them in their picture, and they have, lots of money, I would say probably not. Or, you want to be, you could look at that, but that should not be your primary goal, to look at the accounts that they created, that they posted, because that's their representation of themselves. The court system is verified by when they're booked or they're given a restraining order or a stay away order. The police are verifying that it's them. It's in the court record. It's independent. It's not what they posted. It's what the government has posted. And that's what I would use.
Right. Shirley is asking on Facebook, is this service available through AOA right now? So yes, if you call that number that's on the screen, you can ask for it. Right today, today, May 2nd, it's a secret menu. Only because we're doing the programming. It's so new. This is a new pivot, like a revelation that, wow, we can't get the data that we want on every single person. And so this is a pivot. Next week, May 6th, we're hoping to have that released into the system with no bugs or kinks, and so we'll be praying for that. But yeah, so next week it'll be available online where you can just pick it, pay for it. But today it's the secret menu, kind of like getting an animal style 3x3 at In-N-Out. You have to. It's not on the menu, but it's there. So yeah, it's not on our menu when you look at it, but if you call in, we can definitely get it done for you. All right. How do you decline an applicant if you find that they are a danger to others? Is there a specific form to notify them with that they're denied?
Yes. So you'll let's say there's derogatory information in our report. It'll say possible or verified information from the court. You must provide that to them if that's your sole reason for denying application. And you must give them a page of their rights, so that comes with your report, will be the page that you have to give to them that say these are your rights. And then finally, there's something called a pre-adverse letter, which we will provide also with our report. You can fill it out by putting in your name and the address that you're having the applicant rent, and fill it out and print it and give it to them. It allows them to contact us directly. We're the credit reporting agency now, and we will work with them on clarifying if it's them, if it's not them, is it true, is it not true. There are incidents where there are twins and one twin reports the other, and we found that. We've had people with the same name and date of birth in the same county. In fact, I think there were 19, I forget the name, but it was a common Hispanic name, 19 of them that all had the same birthday, but 3 of them were in the same year and know which one's which. So we would work with them directly, and we would want to have contact from the applicant directly to take it off your hands, and we'll work it out from you. And if we find an error or clarification, we'll then write to you and say, here's what we found out, here's the clarification. But many of them already know that they obviously know they've been in jail. They've obviously known that they've got a restraining order. It's not like a surprise to them. The surprise is going to be, and I've heard this 1,000 times, well, no one has ever looked before. No one's ever found it before. Well, okay, well, now we found it, so you can go terrorize other people if you want, but not my people. That's
Right.
sort of what you're going to have to say.
Right, and so yeah, so what he's talking about, when you order it through AOA, you will get that, just to clarify that.
Yeah.
And also, just generally speaking, there is an adverse action form that AOA has. So if you're denying based on credit, then you would use that form.
We
and
provide one for criminal and civil.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
and then, yeah, so there's a place where you can check it off, but what if you're going to get the service, use everything that they give you, their letterhead, excuse me, because that's coming right from them.
Right.
Okay, if criminal activity is found, that's kind of the same question. So yes, again, they call it an individualized assessment, which you're kind of doing
Right.
to a degree because you're filtering out stuff that's not there. What would you say to this question? If activity is found, would you just turn them away?
Well, let's say they're the only applicant, and you really like them and it seems okay. You have to give them an opportunity to review the report and say, well, if you want to review the report and you say it's not you, take your driver's license or ID to the court clerk, get a stamped certified copy from the clerk, and bring it back to me, and you're good. And also, we want it too, because now we have to go back and correct the court database. Because what we're doing is reporting what the court told us. We've had a lot of cases, I would say, in the 25 years I've been doing this, maybe 10 a year, where the court improperly posted a file on someone that should have been expunged, or it wasn't them, or it wasn't a conviction, and it's still in the court system. So we're happy to go to the clerk, because we know the clerks, and say, look what we found, look what happened, and we take it off the court index with the clerk's help. So we do that a lot, and we're happy to, because we want everyone's records to be accurate.
Right.
If it's derogatory and they deserve to be excluded, great, good for you. You made your place safer and it protects you. If it's really good, there's nothing wrong with them, good for you. Now you made sure someone that's of good standing and credit worthy is now in your property. So that's what we want.
Yeah, so really this is something California lawmakers have made more difficult, and really this is making it more dangerous for renters. I mean,
Right.
they're the ones
everybody.
that have to live there. Obviously, it's our investment, so it matters to us 100% as much, but this is something Gavin Newsom, even it crossed his desk, and he did not sign it to make it so that these records could be seen more easily.
Yeah, last year the state gave him a bill to sign to reinstitute the date of birth in criminal records in the counties that were taking it out, and he didn't want to sign it.
Right, that was a bipartisan bill.
And he didn't want to sign it,
Yep.
which I don't know what he's thinking, but
Yeah.
I'll deal with him later.
All right, so Cindy's asking about you can't have a level of screening, phase 1, phase 2. We were speaking about Illinois. There's a specific county, I believe it's Cook County in Illinois.
Chicago, yeah.
Yeah, and that includes Chicago, the city of Chicago. In that county, the way that they've created their regulation is that you have to search everything else first. You can't get the criminal report with the rest of the report. Like, you have to see it in those two phases. That's not how they're doing it here in California, but just what was recommended last week from one of the attorneys is that its best practice would be to look at everything else first and then look at the criminal, because you'd much rather reject them for some other reason than criminal, just because it's such a touchy thing and all that. So sorry for the confusion on that, Cindy. I hope that clears it up. Jim, once I place my order through AOA, how long does it take to receive the report?
Okay, usually in an hour, we'll have something back to AOA that says we already did our initial screening, and if it's, let's say, LA County, you're going to wait one more day because we have to go in person and look it up. It's not online. You've got to go in and look it up. Same with a lot of the counties in California. You've got to go in either in person or go through a system that accesses their court record. We pay a small fee. We look it up. We see, let's say there's a case. We have to open the case. We have to interpret the case. We have to look at the counts. But usually in an hour, you'll get a good feel. We would clear half the people that we come across in an hour. And the other half might take another day.
And we're talking about LA County here, but
Yeah.
it's any county in the state. So Sacramento, where you're in the same boat,
Yeah.
where the date of birth's been removed, it's the same thing for you. He has a team of people and a network that he's working with to do it.
Luckily, we have access to every county in every state. And unfortunately, because of time changes, let's say our agents on the East Coast aren't, after 10 or 11 in the morning, it's already 3 o'clock, the courts close at 4, it's too late. We're going to have to wait a day. For LA, we go to the courthouses twice a day, in the morning and the afternoon. But odds are, if it's a hand search at a court itself, not a hand search for the file, just a search at the court for cases. It's a different process. We'll usually have it by the next day at the latest. The next business day, because they're closed on the weekend. By the way, if you do an instant search after the courts are closed, that tells you they're not using court information because the courts are closed. So that's one way to know that those instant searches really aren't very good anymore. 10 years ago, the indexes were pretty accurate and very comprehensive. But now that these things are happening, the counties are no longer submitting their data to these instant searches. So as time goes by, that's going to become less and less valuable.
Yeah. Ounce of prevention, pound of cure, huh?
Yeah.
All right. On YouTube, Irina German, I think. What if I only have one person applying and he does not feel safe to me? So I think
then I just have one thing to say. You can bring someone into your life that's going to kill you, but if you like them, I guess go ahead. Like, if you feel like they're a threat to you and they're going to hurt you, can't you just wait for another applicant? Like, is it really worth it to... one thing about investigators that everyone should know, we don't take chances and we don't go on intuition. We just check everything. Not like TV, where you say, oh, I have a feeling, and that would be good. We may or may not have feelings, but we just look at every applicant in every place we can and just know everything we can know. We don't go by how their hair is or how they're nice or did they smile or do they have children. We don't look at that. We just look at the data. Does the data tell us about their history of misconduct? That's all we want to know. And if there's something to worry about, we find it. And if there's nothing to worry about, we tell you there's nothing to worry about. But if you go on your feeling, probably in the end, at some point, it'll come back to hurt you. Same with relationships. The guy's been married 15 times, he's killed 10 women, but you think you're going to change him.
Yeah. And just so you guys know, like, domestic violence is a big issue that Jonathan takes really seriously.
Yeah.
You've written a book, I believe,
A few.
on it.
Yeah,
More
that-
than one book
yeah,
that he's
that's
written
scary.
just on domestic violence.
Yeah.
So this guy, like, I can't tell you all the different things that he's done and that he's currently doing, but yeah, so just understand when he says these things, but there's a whole lot there behind him as a person.
Thank you. I wanted to share something too.
Yeah.
So a lot of this conduct and behavior started a long time ago when they were children. And a lot of it emanates into criminal and civil misconduct later. You can't really cure or fix it without their willingness and participation. So let's say you're going to give them a chance and rent to them, and maybe you're the one that's going to change them. To be honest, they can only change themselves. That's why the state is a little bit misguided with this fresh slate initiative, because the state is thinking if we give someone an opportunity, they will take it and make amends on their conduct. But in reality, they have to want to do so without an opportunity. They have to want to do so from within. And that's where real change begins. So if you're going to give someone a break because they're really bad and you want to give them a break, they have to want to change, and you giving them the break won't have any effect on that, unfortunately. It's something that has to come from inside of them. It's not renting to a person who needs an opportunity. They're not going to change because of an opportunity. In fact, there's an encouragement to not change because they got an opportunity, and why would they change? So unfortunately, you might be hurting them by giving them an extra opportunity to do something that otherwise they wouldn't deserve.
Yeah, that's one of that, in that individualized assessment, it talks about, have they been like restored or, and so sometimes they'll want to show proof of that. Like, how do you process that?
Do you mean if they have their records
that
are
they've been
expunged?
rehabilitated,
Yeah, okay, so that's a good question. So after usually 3 to 5 years, if someone's convicted of a misdemeanor, you can petition the court. I think it's $25. You go to the judge and you show how you got the message and you fixed it. And on a misdemeanor, the judge will usually say, okay, let's see, we're going to seal your record and we'll keep it for another 15 years. And if nothing happens after that, we'll destroy the record. It never happened. But when they seal the record, even though we see it, we can't report it. And we won't use that against them because the judge believes that they've rehabilitated.
Okay.
And even though we may see it, we won't tell you because as far as the court's concerned, they're fine. For a felony, it might be 7 to 15 years. They can have that removed from the record. Same thing, show that they've rehabilitated, they've moved on, they've matured, they now are in a different condition. The court can expunge it or remove it from the record. We may see it. We still have a duty to report it in some cases, like with pharmaceutical drugs, with handling cash, with child care, with elder care. We will still bring that up as a possible thing to be worried about because we're not so sure, even though the court thinks that they probably are okay, we're not so sure that that should be hidden from people. And the duty of care doctrine allows us to evaluate that a little bit. Now, not saying that we would eliminate them from that position because of it, but as an investigator in our back of our mind, we put it together with other things. Let's say they have 5 cases in other counties and 1 here. They're all the same thing. This one here was removed. The other ones are still active. It looks like they're still not remedied quite yet.
All right, yeah, so this next question is good from Jim. Does the AOA $20 fee include financial, evictions, and criminal background? So it's not including the eviction data?
If we find it, we'll provide it.
Okay.
In some counties, they list it in the civil records. We'll put it in.
Okay. So
and the financial, if they have embezzlement, fraud, theft, we'll put that in.
And then in what instance does it cost more? Like it seems. So tell them about that.
Okay. So there's only 2 reasons it would cost more. One is they have a few cases that may or may not be them. We have to hand search the file. We haven't come up with a price, but we would have an agent physically go to the courthouse, order the file, and read the file and confirm to the best of our ability, is it them or is it not them? I would say that might happen now and then, but like I mentioned, you have 5 other candidates. probably faster to go with somebody else.
So are we going to give them, are we going
The
to
option.
contact them and say, hey, do you want to spend an additional whatever amount you set
Yeah.
to search this out, or do you want to just move on to the next candidate?
Right. We'll give them that choice.
Okay.
And maybe they want to look at one or two and just verify. Now, the difficulty is that the counties are trying to hide the date of birth. But if we have a middle name, an odd middle name, we could say, well, we could skip trace and see that nobody else has that full name, including middle name, in LA County, or maybe even California. No one, there's only one person with that name. So we know that person with that middle name is that person that was incarcerated, who lived at the same address, by the way. We'll know that. Even without the date of birth, that takes a live search. An agent has to actually go look it up, and you can't do that by computer. But we could put it together, that doesn't cost extra. But if we have to go to read the file and pull the file, then we have to charge for that. But if we're able to put it together in our office without having to go to the court, we'll do that for free.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for
Sure.
taking time to be here with us.
I think
really
I'll be
appreciate it.
back.
Yeah, I
There's
think
probably
so.
more questions to ask and to answer, and I'm again grateful that finally somebody with a lot of foresight and thought is looking at a way to keep our members safer and their co-residents safer.
And also, Jonathan wrote an article in the May issue of the AOA magazine. So you also can find that online when you go to aoausa.com. Up at the very top, there's the search. You can just type in a few keywords and pull that one up. And yeah, a lot of that was the content that's in this. and
The
it's
article
written out.
probably has more detail.
Yeah, the article does have more detail.
I believe.
So yeah. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you again, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.